They thought humiliating the new black girl would be funny content for TikTok. One prank, one live stream, one chokehold in front of the entire school. What those spoiled rich kids at West Valley didn't realize was that the quiet girl they mocked was the daughter of Darius Carter, the most feared UFC heavyweight to ever step inside a cage. And by the time they understood who her father was, it was already too late. Because this story doesn't end with detention. It ends with careers destroyed, secrets exposed, and an entire school begging the internet for mercy. Stay until the end, because the final twist will absolutely shock you. And before we start, comment below where you're watching this video from. The first thing Naomi Carter noticed about West Valley High was how quiet the hallways became when she walked through them. Not completely silent, not enough to make a scene, just enough for her to feel the shift. Conversations lowered. Eyes followed her. Whispers moved from one group to another like sparks jumping between wires. West Valley looked more like a private college than a public high school. Polished marble floors, championship banners hanging from the ceiling, giant digital screens displaying football highlights and upcoming social events. Money was everywhere in the building. You could feel it in the expensive sneakers, the luxury backpacks, the careless confidence on students' faces. Naomi tightened her grip on the strap of her bag and kept walking toward the front office without looking at anyone. Inside the administration office, Principal Eleanor Graves gave Naomi a smile that felt practiced instead of warm. West Valley is a very competitive environment, she said, while handing over a class schedule. Students here value reputation. Try not to attract unnecessary attention. Naomi immediately noticed the wording. Not welcome. Not we're glad you're here. Just a warning. As Naomi turned to leave the office, the front doors of the school suddenly opened, and several students stepped aside almost automatically. Brandon Hale walked through the hallway like he owned the building. Tall, athletic, wearing a varsity jacket with West Valley's gold and black colors. Brandon carried the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Two basketball players followed behind him, including Mason King, whose size alone made most students move out of his path. Next to them walked Chloe Whitmore, already live streaming with her phone raised toward her face. Okay guys, Chloe said dramatically to her viewers. Apparently we got another transfer student today. So let's see if she survives West Valley. Several students laughed. Naomi tried to walk past them, but Brandon deliberately stepped sideways and slammed his shoulder into hers hard enough to knock her schedule onto the floor. Papers scattered across the hallway. A few students gasped quietly. Brandon looked down at the papers, then at Naomi. Smiling slightly. Me bad, he said, though his tone made it obvious it wasn't an accident. Mason snorted behind him. Chloe immediately turned her live stream camera toward Naomi's face. Oh wow, Chloe mocked. She's already having a rough first day. Naomi bent down calmly and picked up her papers without responding. That irritated Brandon more than if she had yelled at him. He was used to reactions. Fear, anger, embarrassment. Silence made him uncomfortable. You gonna ignore me? Brandon asked loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Naomi stood back up slowly. You're not important enough to ruin my morning. The hallway instantly exploded with shocked reactions. Mason took a step forward. Watch your mouth. But Brandon raised a hand, stopping him. His smile disappeared for half a second before returning, this time colder. Interesting, Naomi thought. So this is how power works here. By lunchtime, the entire school already knew her name. The cafeteria buzzed with noise as Naomi sat alone near the windows. She could feel students staring while pretending not to. Phones pointed subtly in her direction. Chloe's live stream clips were already spreading across social media pages connected to West Valley students. Then Brandon approached her table again. This time, he wore a charming smile designed for an audience. "You know," he said casually, extending his hand. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Naomi looked at his hand but didn't move. Around them, students began pulling out phones. Brandon kept smiling. "Come on. Fresh start." Naomi finally stood up, grabbed her tray, and looked him directly in the eyes. "People like you don't want peace," she said quietly. "You want control." Then she walked away without touching his hand. The cafeteria fell completely silent. For the first time in years, Brandon Hale looked embarrassed in front of his own school. Chloe's eyes widened with excitement. She had just found content that would dominate the school for weeks. "Oh my God," she whispered to her live stream. "She really thinks she's special." Later that afternoon, Naomi entered the school gym for orientation activities. Championship banners covered the walls. Most funded by the Hale Family Foundation. Coach announcements echoed through the speakers, while Brandon's basketball team practiced aggressively on the court. Naomi could already feel the atmosphere changing around her. Conversations stopped whenever she passed by. Students stared openly now instead of pretending not to. Near the bleachers, Lucas Reed sat reviewing paperwork for student athletics when a folder accidentally slid from the top of a stack onto the floor. Naomi's transfer file opened in front of him before he could stop it. He glanced down automatically, then froze. Guardian name Darius Carter. Lucas stared at the paper again to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Darius Carter. The Darius Carter, former UFC heavyweight champion. The Beast. One of the most feared fighters in combat sports history. Lucas slowly looked up toward Naomi standing alone near the gym entrance. No designer clothes. No attitude. No attempt to impress anyone. And somehow, she had never mentioned who her father was. Across the gym, Brandon bounced a basketball while watching Naomi from a distance. His humiliation at lunch still burned in his chest. Around him, students whispered and laughed, while replaying Chloe's live stream clips. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Brandon Hale hated losing control. That night, Chloe uploaded a new video titled, "The New Girl Thinks She Runs West Valley." The clip showed Naomi refusing Brandon's handshake while dramatic music played in the background. Chloe added zoom-ins, captions, and fake commentary designed to make Naomi look arrogant and disrespectful. Within hours, the video exploded across student accounts. 10,000 views. 20,000. More comments. More insults. More attention. Alone in her room, Naomi stared at her phone screen while notifications kept appearing faster and faster. She exhaled slowly and tossed the phone onto her bed. To her, it still felt like stupid high school drama. Immature rich kids playing social games. What Naomi didn't realize was that she had just become the target of the most powerful students in West Valley High. By the second morning, Naomi Carter already understood the unspoken rules of West Valley High. Reputation mattered more than kindness. Popularity mattered more than truth. And once the school decided you were a target, everyone either joined the attack or stayed silent to protect themselves. As Naomi walked through the crowded hallway toward the cafeteria, she could feel phones turning toward her before she even looked up. Some students whispered openly now. Others smirked while pretending not to stare. Chloe Whitmore's video from the previous night had spread far beyond the school's social circle. Students were reposting clips of Naomi refusing Brandon's handshake with captions, calling her the angry new girl or the attitude transfer. Naomi tried to ignore it. She kept telling herself it was temporary. High school drama. Nothing more. But Chloe had no intention of letting the attention die. The cafeteria buzzed with excitement that afternoon. Naomi immediately sensed something strange the moment she walked inside. Too many people were watching her. Too many phones already recording. At the center of the room, Chloe sat on top of a cafeteria table with her live stream running again, laughing dramatically, while thousands of viewers flooded the comments section. "Okay, guys," Chloe said to the camera. "Today we're testing whether our new girl can survive a harmless little prank." Several students laughed nervously. Others looked uncomfortable but stayed quiet. Naomi ignored them and continued walking toward an empty table near the back wall. She had almost made it when her foot suddenly caught on something stretched across the floor. Before she could react, her body slammed forward hard. Her tray exploded across the cafeteria. Food scattered everywhere. Milk splashed across her clothes. The entire room erupted into laughter. Someone had tied a nearly invisible wire between two chair legs. Naomi stayed frozen on the floor for half a second, while humiliation burned through her chest. Around her, students recorded everything instead of helping. Chloe zoomed in dramatically with her phone. "Oh my God." Chloe laughed. That was actually perfect. Naomi slowly pushed herself back up, her hands shaking slightly. Then Brandon Hale appeared beside her with fake concern written across his face. "Wha?" Brandon said loudly, offering his hand like some kind of hero. "You okay?" The entire cafeteria knew he was performing. Naomi looked at his hand but didn't take it. Brandon leaned closer, lowering his voice enough that only she could hear. "You should really learn how things work around here." Then, before Naomi could respond, Brandon suddenly turned back toward the crowd and smiled. "Guess balance isn't her thing." The cafeteria exploded with laughter again. Even students who looked uncomfortable still laughed because Brandon was laughing. Because at West Valley, survival meant choosing the right side. Naomi grabbed her ruined backpack and walked out, while Chloe's live stream followed her all the way to the cafeteria doors. Things only became worse after gym class. When Naomi entered the girls' locker room, she immediately noticed the silence. A few girls exchanged glances before quickly leaving together. The moment Naomi stepped farther inside, the heavy locker room door slammed shut behind her. Then came the metallic click. Locked. Naomi rushed toward the handle and pulled hard. But it wouldn't move. Outside the door, muffled laughter echoed through the hallway. Mason's voice rose above the others. "Maybe she needs some time alone." More laughter followed. Naomi pounded against the door. "Open it." No answer. Minutes passed. Then, nearly an hour. At first Naomi tried staying calm. But as the empty locker room grew darker and quieter, panic slowly began creeping into her chest. She pulled out her phone and realized she had no signal inside the concrete room. Her breathing became uneven. Tears welled in her eyes, despite her trying to stop them. What Naomi didn't know was that someone had secretly slid a phone beneath the lockers earlier. Still recording. Still live streaming. By the time a janitor finally unlocked the door, clips of Naomi crying alone inside the locker room had already spread across social media pages connected to West Valley. The comments were even uglier this time. "She's so dramatic. Why is she always acting like a victim? Send her back where she came from." Others were openly racist now, hiding behind fake usernames and laughing emojis. Naomi sat alone in the parking lot after school, staring at her phone while notifications flooded endlessly across the screen. Her chest tightened with every comment, every repost, every cruel joke. For the first time since arriving at West Valley, she felt something dangerous slipping through the cracks of her composure. Anger. Humiliation. Isolation. She suddenly threw the phone into the passenger seat and covered her face with trembling hands. Across the parking lot, Lucas Reed watched from inside his car. Guilt twisted inside him. He had laughed with Brandon before, stayed quiet before, pretended not to notice what happened to other students because it was easier than becoming the next target. But Naomi looked genuinely broken, and Brandon was enjoying it too much. Later that night, Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. At first, she assumed it was more harassment, but when she opened the file attached to the message, her expression slowly changed. The video had clearly been recorded earlier that morning before lunch. Brandon stood beside Chloe and Mason near the cafeteria entrance. "Make sure everybody's filming when she falls," Brandon said casually. "And don't miss her face this time." Chloe laughed. "This is gonna destroy her online." The video ended there. Naomi stared at the screen in stunned silence. Whoever sent the clip had just proven Brandon planned everything. A second message appeared immediately afterward. "Unknown. I'm trying to help you." Naomi frowned. Then another message arrived. "Unknown. But if Brandon finds out I contacted you, I'm done." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly as realization began forming in her mind. Lucas, before she could type a response, one final notification appeared on her screen from another anonymous account. "If you want peace at West Valley, disappear." Naomi slowly looked up through the windshield of her car toward the dark silhouette of West Valley High standing across the parking lot. For the first time, the school no longer felt childish. It felt dangerous. And while Naomi sat alone believing the entire world had turned against her, far beyond the city limits, a black SUV was already moving silently down the highway toward West Valley. The old gym smelled like sweat, rust, and faded memories. Heavy punching bags hung from cracked ceiling beams, swaying slightly every time someone hit them hard enough. Most people driving past the building would never guess that one of the most feared fighters in UFC history trained there every single morning before sunrise. Darius Carter preferred it that way. No cameras, no interviews, no crowds chanting his name anymore. Just silence. A younger fighter across the ring threw a combination toward him, fast and aggressive. But Darius slipped every punch effortlessly despite being nearly 20 years older. His movements were calm, economical, terrifyingly precise. Then, without warning, he countered with one short body shot that dropped the younger man onto one knee, gasping for air. The entire gym went quiet. Darius stepped back immediately. "Your guard drops when you get emotional," he said flatly. The fighter nodded painfully. Years ago, sports commentators used to call Darius the Beast because of what happened after the cage door closed. He had dominated the heavyweight division for nearly a decade, destroying champions with a frightening mix of patience and violence. Fans loved him. Sponsors chased him. Opponents feared him. Then came the scandal that destroyed everything overnight. One bad incident, one violent altercation outside the octagon, one headline repeated endlessly across every sports network in America. IFC, Monster loses control. Even though criminal charges were eventually dropped, the damage never disappeared. Sponsors vanished. The media turned against him. Darius walked away from the spotlight before the spotlight could finish tearing him apart. Since then, he lived quietly, training fighters in a forgotten gym, while raising Naomi alone after his wife passed away years earlier. But despite everything he survived inside cages, nothing frightened him more than failing his daughter. That evening, Naomi entered their small house carrying the same controlled expression she had worn for days. Darius immediately noticed the tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her eyes. He sat at the kitchen table cleaning hand wraps while watching her carefully. "How's school?" he asked. Naomi forced a shrug. "Fine." Darius knew instantly she was lying. Parents learned certain things after enough years. Naomi always touched the sleeve of her hoodie when hiding stress. She was doing it now. "You sure? Yeah." She avoided eye contact while grabbing a bottle of water from the refrigerator. Darius considered pushing further, but Naomi had inherited his stubbornness. When she wanted silence, forcing her only made the walls higher. So instead, he nodded slowly. Meanwhile, inside West Valley High, Principal Eleanor Graves sat alone in her office, reviewing emails near the end of the school day. One subject line immediately caught her attention: urgent student harassment evidence. Attached were screenshots from Chloe's live streams, clips from the cafeteria prank, and multiple anonymous complaints accusing Brandon Hale and his friends of targeted bullying. Eleanor's expression tightened as she skimmed through the evidence. The situation was obviously serious. Any responsible administrator would have launched an investigation immediately. Then her office phone rang. "Eleanor," said a calm male voice on the other end. "I heard there's some drama involving Brandon." It was Charles Hale, Brandon's father, billionaire developer, chairman of the school board, the man who funded West Valley's football stadium, gym renovations, and scholarship programs. Half the school existed because of his money. Eleanor glanced back at the email. "It's probably nothing." She replied carefully, "It better stay nothing," Charles said coldly before hanging up. The office became silent again. Eleanor stared at the complaint for several long seconds. Then she quietly dragged the email into the trash folder. Across campus, Brandon sat in the empty gym bleachers spinning a basketball lazily while Chloe edited more clips of Naomi for social media. "She's perfect for content." Chloe laughed. "People are obsessed with her." Brandon's jaw tightened slightly. "She embarrassed me. So crush her." Brandon bounced the basketball harder this time. "I will." Later that night, Naomi locked herself inside her bedroom and tried ignoring the constant notifications flooding her phone. Every time she opened social media, another humiliating clip appeared. Another joke. Another edited video. Another racist comment hidden behind anonymous usernames. She finally turned the phone face down on her desk and buried her face in her hands. In the living room, Darius sat alone watching late-night sports highlights on mute. One of his younger fighters had tagged him in a random TikTok video earlier that evening with the message, "Coach, isn't this your daughter?" At first, Darius ignored it. Then curiosity made him open the link. The moment the video started playing, the room changed completely. He watched Naomi slam into the cafeteria floor while students laughed around her. He watched Chloe zoom the camera closer. He watched Brandon pretend to help while publicly humiliating her. Then another clip appeared automatically. Naomi crying inside a locked locker room while comments flooded the screen. Darius stared silently at the phone. Another video loaded. Then another. And another. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. His daughter was being hunted publicly for entertainment. Slowly, Darius leaned back against the couch. His expression didn't explode with anger. That was the frightening part. It became completely still. The kind of silence that came before violence. For years, he had taught himself control, buried the rage that once destroyed his career, built a quiet life away from chaos. But now strangers were humiliating Naomi in front of the entire internet. Darius replayed one clip again where Brandon smirked directly into the camera after Naomi fell in the cafeteria. That smile. That arrogance. He had seen it before in fighters who believed nobody could touch them. Darius stood up slowly, grabbed his black jacket from the chair, and reached for his car keys sitting beside the door. The lights from passing cars reflected faintly across his face as his eyes hardened into something colder than anger. Something dangerous. Upstairs, Naomi still believed she could survive West Valley by enduring it quietly. She had no idea that by tomorrow morning, West Valley High would come face to face with a man they should never have provoked. By Friday night, West Valley High looked less like a school and more like a stadium preparing for war. Music thundered through the packed gymnasium while students in black and gold jackets screamed from the bleachers, waving banners for the basketball team. Phones flashed everywhere. Live streams had already started before the game even began because at West Valley, nothing existed unless it was online. Naomi Carter stood near the entrance, holding her backpack tightly against her shoulder, instantly regretting coming. She normally would have skipped the game entirely, but attendance for senior students had practically been made mandatory after Principal Graves announced it earlier that morning. Naomi could already feel eyes following her the second she stepped inside. Then she heard Chloe Whitmore's voice echo through the speakers of several nearby phones. Well, look who actually showed up. Naomi turned and saw Chloe weaving through the crowd with her live stream running once again. Thousands of viewers flooded the comments section in real time, while Chloe zoomed the camera directly toward Naomi's face. Guys, Chloe laughed dramatically. Our favorite transfer student decided to bless the game with her presence. Several students nearby laughed immediately. Naomi tried walking past her without reacting, but Chloe stepped sideways to block her path. Come on, Chloe mocked. At least say hi to the internet. Naomi's jaw tightened. Move. The chat exploded with laughing emojis as Chloe grinned wider. Oh. She's in a bad mood tonight. Across the court, Brandon Hale noticed the scene instantly. He spun the basketball in his hands while the crowd cheered his name from the bleachers. Everything about the night fed his ego, the lights, the attention, the control, and lately, humiliating, Naomi had become his favorite form of entertainment. Brandon jogged toward the sidelines during warm-ups, grabbing a microphone from one of the student announcers before anyone could stop him. Yo, he said casually into the mic, his voice booming across the packed gym. I think we should officially welcome our new student. The crowd immediately roared. Naomi froze near the lower bleachers as hundreds of faces turned toward her. Brandon smiled from center court. Come on, Naomi. Don't be shy. More laughter echoed around the gym. Even students who looked uncomfortable stayed silent because nobody wanted Brandon targeting them next. Naomi tried turning away, but Chloe suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer toward the court while still live streaming everything. Guys, she's nervous, Chloe shouted happily. The humiliation hit Naomi like heat crawling beneath her skin. Everywhere she looked, phones pointed toward her face. People weren't even pretending anymore. She wasn't a student to them. She was content. Brandon bounced the basketball once and smirked. You know, West Valley's all about confidence. Maybe Naomi could teach a class on attitude instead. The crowd exploded again. Then Mason King appeared carrying a giant cooler beside the team bench. Naomi immediately sensed something was wrong. Brandon looked toward Mason briefly. That tiny glance was enough. Before Naomi could react, Mason lifted a massive bottle of ice water and dumped it directly over her head. The freezing water slammed into Naomi's body, soaking her clothes instantly. The shock forced a gasp from her lungs as the entire gym erupted into hysterical laughter. Some students literally stood up from their seats screaming. Chloe nearly dropped her phone from laughing too hard. Oh my God, Chloe shouted into the live stream. Did you guys see her face? Water dripped from Naomi's hair onto the polished gym floor, while Brandon stood at center court smiling calmly like he had done nothing wrong. Something inside Naomi cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of break that happened after too much pressure for too long. Without saying a word, she turned and pushed through the crowd toward the back exit behind the gymnasium, while laughter chased her through the building like a wave. Naomi reached the dark hallway behind the locker rooms and finally stopped walking. Her breathing shook unevenly as tears mixed with the cold water still running down her face. The muffled sounds of the basketball game echoed faintly through the walls behind her. Then footsteps approached. Naomi looked up instantly. Brandon, Mason, and Chloe still filming everything. "You ran off too fast," Brandon said casually. Naomi backed away slightly. "Leave me alone." Mason blocked the hallway exit behind her with a grin. "Relax. We're just talking." Chloe lowered the phone slightly. Though the live stream never ended, that was the terrifying part. Thousands of people were still watching. Comments flooded the screen faster than Chloe could read them. "This is insane. Keep filming." She's about to cry again. Naomi finally realized none of this was accidental anymore. They weren't joking. They were hunting her for entertainment. Brandon stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. "You know what your problem is?" he asked quietly. "You came into my school acting like you were above everybody." Naomi stared back at him despite the fear tightening in her chest. "Your school," Brandon smiled coldly. "Yeah." Then Mason suddenly shoved Naomi backward hard enough for her shoulder blades to slam against the metal lockers lining the hallway. The impact echoed sharply. "Stop," Naomi snapped, but Mason grabbed the front of her soaked hoodie and pinned her harder against the lockers, while Chloe's live stream camera shook excitedly. "Look at her now." Mason laughed. Naomi struggled violently, trying to push him away. But Mason was too strong. Brandon watched silently, completely calm, completely in control. Then Mason's hand suddenly tightened around Naomi's throat. The world instantly narrowed. Naomi clawed at his wrist as panic exploded through her body. Her back slammed harder against the lockers, while her breathing collapsed into broken gasps. The live stream comments began moving even faster now. Viewers realizing this had gone far beyond a prank. Chloe whispered nervously, though she still didn't stop filming. Naomi's vision blurred slightly. The pressure around her throat tightened again. And then boom, the heavy gym entrance doors suddenly burst open somewhere behind them. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Every head turned instantly toward the darkness at the far end of the corridor. Someone had just arrived, and the atmosphere changed immediately. The moment the gym doors slammed open, the entire hallway froze. Mason's grip remained tight around Naomi's throat for half a second longer, before his attention shifted toward the figure standing at the far end of the corridor. Heavy footsteps echoed slowly against the concrete floor. Calm. Measured. Controlled. A tall man in a dark jacket walked out of the shadows beneath the flickering hallway lights. His expression unreadable as his eyes locked directly onto Mason's hand around Naomi's neck. Naomi's breathing hitched instantly. "Dad," the word barely escaped her throat. Chloe lowered her phone slightly in confusion, while the live stream comments exploded. "Who is that? Is that her father? Bro, this just got serious." Darius Carter kept walking forward without rushing. That was the unsettling part. Most people would have panicked seeing their daughter pinned against lockers, but the man moving toward them looked terrifyingly calm, like somebody holding violence on a leash. "Take your hand off my daughter," Darius said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Mason laughed immediately, tightening his grip slightly just to show dominance. Or what? Naomi clawed weakly at Mason's wrist, struggling to breathe, while Brandon leaned casually against the lockers nearby, watching the situation unfold like entertainment. Chloe nervously glanced between Mason and the live stream screen. "Guys, I think maybe we should stop." "No," Brandon said instantly. "Keep filming." That one sentence changed everything. Brandon wanted an audience. He wanted control. And right now he believed he still had it. Darius stopped only a few feet away from them. Up close. The exhaustion in his face became visible old scars. Tired eyes. Years of damage hidden beneath stillness. To Brandon and Mason. He looked like nothing more than another angry parent. Mason smirked. "Listen, old man. This ain't your business." Darius didn't even look at him. "It became my business," he replied coldly. "The second you touched her," something about the way he said it caused even Chloe to step backward slightly. Naomi's vision blurred as Mason's arm pressed harder against her throat. "Dad," she whispered again, panic beginning to crack through her voice. That was enough. Darius took one step forward. Mason instantly shoved Naomi sideways and stepped toward him aggressively. "You got a problem or something?" Brandon folded his arms, grinning now. "Relax. Mason. He's probably just another washed-up dad trying to act tough." Several students had started gathering near the hallway entrance. Drawn by Chloe's live stream and the rising tension, phones pointed everywhere now. Nobody noticed Lucas standing silently near the back crowd. His face growing paler by the second, he recognized Darius immediately. And he knew everybody else was seconds away from making a catastrophic mistake. Mason moved closer until he stood chest to chest with Darius. "You should leave before somebody gets hurt." Darius finally looked directly into his eyes. And for the first time all night, Mason's smile faded slightly. There was no fear in Darius's face. No hesitation. Just cold calculation. Brandon sensed the shift immediately and stepped in again, wanting control back. "What's wrong?" he mocked loudly for the live stream audience. Big Scary Dad came to save the day. A few students laughed nervously. Then Mason made the worst decision of his life. He shoved Darius hard with both hands. What happened next occurred so fast, most people didn't fully understand it until Mason was already screaming on the floor. The instant Mason pushed him, Darius moved. One sharp sidestep, a violent wrist capture, a sudden rotation of hips and shoulders. Then Mason's entire body flipped through the air before crashing onto the concrete hallway floor with a horrifying impact. Boom! The sound echoed through the corridor. Phones dropped. Students gasped. Mason cried out in pain, clutching his arm while staring upward in complete shock. 1 second earlier, he had been towering over everyone in the hallway. Now he couldn't even stand up, and Darius hadn't even broken a sweat. The entire gym entrance fell silent. Not normal silence. The kind of silence people make when their brains suddenly realize they may be in danger. Chloe's live stream camera shook violently in her hands as comments exploded faster than she could read them. "What the hell? Who is this guy, bro? Just got destroyed." Naomi stared at her father in disbelief. She had never seen him like this before. Not fully. Not the side the world used to fear. Darius stepped calmly between Naomi and the others, without even glancing down at Mason writhing on the ground. "Naomi," he said quietly, eyes still fixed on Brandon. "Come here." She moved beside him immediately. For the first time since arriving at West Valley, Brandon Hale no longer looked comfortable. Still, his pride refused to let him back down. "You think that impresses me?" Brandon snapped, though uncertainty had started creeping into his voice. "You just assaulted a student." Darius stared at him coldly. "No, I stopped one." Then a new voice suddenly cut through the hallway. "Oh my God." Everyone turned. One of the assistant basketball coaches stood frozen near the gym doors, staring directly at Darius with wide eyes. "That's Darius Carter." The hallway went dead quiet again. A student frowned. Who the coach looked genuinely horrified. "Are you kidding me?" he whispered. "That's the beast. Former UFC heavyweight champion." Everything changed instantly. Students grabbed their phones faster. Chloe's live stream viewer count exploded upward in real time as people across social media began recognizing the face now appearing on screen. Sports accounts started reposting clips within seconds. Wait, that's Darius Carter. No freaking way. West Valley students just messed with his daughter. Brandon's expression shifted for the first time all night. Confusion. Then, realization. Then fear. Even Mason stopped groaning for a moment, staring upward at Darius, like he finally understood why getting thrown felt like being hit by a truck. The live stream numbers climbed higher and higher. 500,000 viewers. 1 million. Then over 2 million people watching live as clips spread across TikTok, Instagram, and sports pages simultaneously. Darius ignored all of it. His attention remained fixed entirely on Naomi's trembling breathing beside him. "You okay?" he asked softly. Naomi nodded weakly, though tears were already forming again. Behind them, Chloe slowly lowered her phone as panic finally replaced excitement. What started as school drama had become something far beyond their control now. Because the most dangerous thing wasn't Mason getting slammed onto the floor. It wasn't the viral live stream. And it wasn't even the fact that millions of people had just witnessed West Valley students attack the daughter of a UFC legend. The truly terrifying part was that the internet had started digging, and once people began searching for the truth behind West Valley High, everything hidden beneath the school's perfect reputation was about to surface. By midnight, the live stream from West Valley High had spread across nearly every major social media platform in America. Sports pages reposted clips of Darius Carter throwing Mason King to the floor in less than 2 seconds. Reaction channels dissected the footage frame by frame. News accounts began asking the same question over and over again. Why was the daughter of a former UFC champion being publicly humiliated inside one of the richest schools in California? Inside Principal Eleanor Graves' office, panic had already replaced control. "This situation is getting out of hand," one administrator whispered while refreshing social media feeds on a laptop. "Millions of people are watching this." Eleanor stood near her desk, gripping a glass of water tightly enough that her fingers trembled. Outside her office windows, reporters had already begun gathering near the school entrance despite it being late at night. Phone calls flooded nonstop from parents, school board members, and sponsors demanding answers. Then the office doors suddenly opened. Darius Carter walked inside without asking permission. The room instantly changed temperature. Eleanor straightened immediately. "Mr. Carter, I want the security footage." Darius interrupted coldly. "No yelling. No threats. Just absolute control. The hallway cameras. The locker rooms. The cafeteria. Everything." Eleanor hesitated for half a second too long. "That material is school property," she replied carefully. "There are legal procedures. My daughter was assaulted in your building." Darius said, "You have 30 seconds to stop protecting these kids." The administrators exchanged nervous glances, even standing still. Darius carried the same pressure he once brought into UFC arenas. Years ago, opponents used to describe feeling fear the moment he entered the cage. Now that same energy filled Eleanor's office. Still, she forced herself to maintain composure. West Valley takes bullying very seriously. Darius stared at her silently. That silence was worse than shouting, because both of them knew she was lying. Across town, Brandon Hale sat inside his massive modern mansion, while every television in the house replayed clips from the live stream. His father, Charles Hale, stood near the fireplace speaking angrily on the phone with lawyers and public relations managers. "You control the narrative immediately," Charles snapped. "I don't care what it costs." Brandon tried pretending calm. But for the first time in years, uncertainty had begun creeping beneath his confidence. You didn't say the girl's father was Darius Carter, Charles said suddenly after hanging up. Brandon frowned. How was I supposed to know? Charles stepped closer slowly. Because now the media smells blood. Meanwhile, Naomi sat quietly in the waiting area of the local police station wrapped in a gray hoodie while officers took statements about the assault. Bruises had already started forming lightly around her neck. Darius stood nearby, speaking with detectives. His jaw locked tight every time he glanced toward the marks on his daughter's skin. One officer lowered his voice carefully. Mr. Carter, there's already pressure coming from powerful people connected to the school. Darius looked at him directly. Meaning? The officer hesitated. Meaning this case may disappear unless there's undeniable evidence. That sentence alone told Darius everything. The system around West Valley was rotten, and people with money were protecting it. As Naomi finished giving her statement, someone quietly entered the police station lobby, wearing a hoodie pulled low over their face. Lucas Reed. He looked terrified. His eyes kept scanning the windows nervously, like he expected someone to follow him. Mr. Carter, he whispered. Darius turned instantly. Lucas swallowed hard before pulling a small USB drive from his pocket. You need to see this. Minutes later, Darius plugged the drive into a police station computer while Naomi sat beside him. What appeared on the screen changed everything. Video after video after video. Not just Naomi. Other students. Different years. Different victims. Some crying in locker rooms. Some publicly humiliated during pep rallies. Some cornered in hallways while Brandon and his friends laughed in the background. One clip showed a terrified sophomore boy being shoved repeatedly into lockers, while Brandon filmed it. Another showed Chloe spreading humiliating rumors about a girl who later disappeared from school entirely. Naomi covered her mouth slowly in horror. This kept happening, she whispered. Lucas nodded shakily. Nobody stops them. Darius kept watching silently. Then another file opened automatically. This one was worse. A recorded conversation between two school administrators discussing a former student named Ethan Morales. He's unstable. One administrator said nervously. No. Another voice replied. He's traumatized. Brandon's group destroyed that kid. The screen then displayed disciplinary records. Ethan Morales had transferred schools 6 months earlier after severe depression and repeated harassment. Every complaint filed against Brandon Hale had been erased. Every investigation buried. Every victim silenced. Lucas looked at Darius carefully. Brandon's father controls the school board. Teachers know it. Principals know it. Everybody stays quiet because Charles Hale funds half the school. Naomi stared blankly at the screen, while pieces finally connected in her mind. This wasn't random bullying anymore. West Valley had become a machine built to protect powerful students while sacrificing everyone else. And Brandon believed himself untouchable because adults helped make him that way. Darius leaned back slowly in his chair. His face became unreadable. That terrified Lucas more than anger would have. Mr. Carter, Lucas said carefully. There's more. He opened one final folder. Financial records. Private emails. Security footage deletion requests. Direct instructions from Charles Hale, demanding incidents involving Brandon never reach public records. The room fell silent. Even the police officers watching nearby looked disturbed now. Charles Hale hadn't simply protected his son. He had buried years of violence to preserve West Valley's perfect reputation. Naomi looked toward her father nervously. Dad, Darius stood up slowly. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then he finally looked toward the officers. Toward Lucas. Toward the evidence covering the screen. And when he spoke, his voice was calm enough to send chills through the room. I'm going to destroy every single one of them. No one doubted him. Not after seeing the evidence. Not after seeing Naomi's bruises, and definitely not after realizing Darius Carter was no longer fighting for fame, money, or championships. He was fighting for his daughter. Outside the police station, reporters continued gathering beneath flashing lights, while live-stream clips from West Valley spread faster across the internet every minute. Because by morning, the entire country would know the name West Valley High. By sunrise, West Valley High had become the center of a national scandal. Satellite news vans lined the streets outside the school entrance. Before classes even started, reporters crowded the sidewalks holding microphones while helicopters circled overhead. Every major social media platform was flooded with clips from the live stream showing Naomi Carter being humiliated, cornered, and nearly choked inside the school hallway while millions watched in real time. But the moment that truly ignited the internet wasn't Mason attacking Naomi, it was the arrival of Darius Carter. The footage of the former UFC champion dropping Mason to the floor spread across sports networks, celebrity pages, and national news channels overnight. People who hadn't followed UFC in years suddenly remembered exactly who the beast was. Comment sections exploded with outrage. Those kids attacked his daughter. Why was nobody stopping this? This school needs to be investigated. Inside West Valley, the atmosphere had completely changed. Students who once laughed openly now whispered nervously in corners, while teachers avoided eye contact with reporters outside classroom windows. Some students deleted old posts mocking Naomi. Others pretended they had supported her the entire time. Fear had replaced confidence. But not for Brandon Hale. Not yet. Brandon stormed through the hallway, gripping his phone so tightly, his knuckles turned white. Every screen he opened made things worse. News anchors replayed his face beside headlines, calling him a bully. Former classmates from other schools were posting stories online. Even sports commentators discussed the scandal during live broadcasts. And Chloe Whitmore was becoming the internet's newest villain. Videos from her live streams resurfaced one after another. Clips of her laughing while Naomi cried. Clips of her encouraging pranks. Clips of racist comments appearing while she continued filming instead of stopping the harassment. Millions of strangers flooded Chloe's accounts with hate overnight. By noon, several sponsorship brands had publicly cut ties with her social media accounts. Chloe sat trembling inside her bedroom, staring at her collapsing follower count. "What do I do?" she whispered into the phone while talking to Brandon. Brandon paced furiously inside his room. "Stop panicking. They're posting my address online. Then stay off the internet." Chloe's breathing became shaky. "This isn't funny anymore." Brandon. For the first time since the scandal exploded, Brandon finally snapped. "Because you kept filming everything," he shouted. The line went silent. Even Chloe sounded stunned. Brandon immediately ended the call and hurled his phone across the room, hard enough to crack the wall behind it. Rage boiled through him uncontrollably now. For years, every problem disappeared because his father handled it. Teachers stayed quiet. Students stayed scared. Administrators buried complaints before they became dangerous. But this time the internet had moved faster than money, and Brandon could feel control slipping away. Meanwhile, across town, Darius sat silently inside Naomi's living room while national news coverage played non-stop on television screens. Naomi remained beside the window, scrolling through endless messages from strangers online. Some supported her. Others demanded justice. But mixed between the support were threats, conspiracy theories, and cruel comments from people treating her trauma like entertainment. Darius watched her carefully. "You don't have to read all that," he said quietly. Naomi gave a tired shrug. "It's everywhere anyway." Before Darius could respond, the television suddenly switched to a live interview outside West Valley High. A former student stood beside reporters wearing sunglasses and a hood pulled low over his face. "My name doesn't matter," the former student said nervously. But people need to know Brandon Hale has been doing this for years. The newsroom behind the reporter became silent. He destroyed people. The former student continued. Everybody at West Valley knows it. Then came the sentence that changed everything. There was a student named Ryan Mitchell 2 years ago. The reporter frowned. What happened to him? The former student hesitated, then spoke softly. He killed himself after months of harassment from Brandon's group. The entire room watching the interview froze. Naomi slowly lowered her phone. Darius's expression darkened instantly. The former student continued speaking while cameras rolled live across the nation. Ryan reported the bullying multiple times. Nothing happened. Brandon's father buried everything. Another reporter stepped forward quickly. Are you accusing West Valley of covering up abuse connected to a student's suicide? Yes. The former student answered. And everybody there knows I'm telling the truth. Within minutes, social media exploded again. New hashtags appeared. Number, Justice for Ryan. Number, West Valley cover-up. Number, Arrest Brandon Hale. Inside the Hale mansion, Charles Hale stared at the television in complete disbelief, while lawyers shouted over each other through speakerphones. This is turning criminal. One attorney warned. Brandon barely heard any of it, because one thought had started consuming him entirely. Lucas. Only Lucas could have leaked the footage. Only Lucas had access to the files. And suddenly Brandon realized something terrifying. Someone from inside his own circle had betrayed him. Brandon grabbed his car keys and stormed toward the front door while his father shouted behind him. Where are you going? But Brandon ignored him completely. His breathing had become uneven now. Wild. Unstable. For the first time in his life. Brandon Hale looked afraid. Not of punishment. Not of police. Not even of Darius Carter. He was afraid of losing power. And people like Brandon became most dangerous the moment they realized the world was no longer protecting them. As rain began pouring over the city outside, Brandon climbed into his car and slammed the door hard. Then he drove away with one destination in mind: find Lucas Reed. Before Lucas destroyed him completely, rain hammered against the streets of West Valley long after midnight, turning the city into a blur of neon reflections and police sirens. The scandal surrounding West Valley High had only grown larger overnight. News anchors now openly discussed possible criminal investigations connected to bullying cover-ups, while protesters gathered outside the school carrying signs demanding justice for Naomi Carter and Ryan Mitchell. Inside the school itself, fear had infected every hallway. Teachers whispered behind closed doors. Students deleted old videos and private group chats in panic. Nobody knew who might be exposed next, but Brandon Hale no longer cared about damage control. He wanted revenge. Lucas Reed sat alone inside his car in an empty grocery store parking lot, nervously refreshing his phone every few seconds. Since leaking the videos, anonymous threats had flooded his inbox non-stop. Traitor. You're dead. Watch your back. Lucas already regretted everything. But it was too late now. The internet had the files. The police had copies. And Darius Carter knew the truth. There was no going backward anymore. Then headlights suddenly appeared behind him. Lucas froze instantly. A black SUV pulled into the parking space beside his car. Brandon stepped out. Lucas's heartbeat spiked. Brandon slammed the door behind him and walked toward the driver's side window slowly. Rain soaking through his hoodie, while fury burned openly in his eyes now. Lucas cracked the window only slightly. Brandon, you think you're smart? Brandon interrupted quietly. The calmness in his voice felt worse than shouting. You leaked the files. Lucas swallowed hard. People needed to know. Brandon laughed once. Cold. Empty. You just destroyed my life. You destroyed other people's lives first. For a brief second, silence hung between them while rain pounded against the roof of the car. Then Brandon leaned closer toward the window. "If you don't fix this," he whispered, "I swear to God you'll disappear just like Ryan did." Lucas's blood turned cold instantly. Before he could answer, Brandon punched the side mirror hard enough to crack it and stormed back toward his SUV. Lucas sat frozen in place, breathing unevenly. That wasn't a threat anymore. That sounded like desperation. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi Carter stood in front of West Valley High, surrounded by cameras for the first time since the scandal exploded. Reporters shouted questions from behind barricades, while students gathered nearby, pretending not to stare. Beside Naomi stood Darius, silent and intimidating as always, wearing a black coat with both hands calmly in his pockets. A reporter raised her microphone. "Naomi, do you believe the school failed to protect you?" Naomi hesitated. Only a week earlier she would have avoided every camera, avoided every confrontation. But something had changed after the live stream incident. After realizing how many people suffered before her while everyone stayed silent, Naomi slowly stepped toward the microphones. "Yes," she answered clearly. The crowd instantly quieted. They knew what was happening. Her voice trembled slightly but never broke. "Not just to me. To other students too." Cameras flashed rapidly now. Naomi continued speaking, despite Brandon's supporters glaring from the school entrance. People kept telling victims to stay quiet because Brandon Hale's family controlled everything. She looked directly toward the school building itself. That's why this kept happening. Inside the administration offices above them, Principal Eleanor Graves watched the interview unfold on television with growing panic. Every statement Naomi made increased pressure on the school district, the police, and the Hale family simultaneously. Then her office phone rang again. "Charles Hale." Eleanor answered immediately. "You told me this situation was contained." Charles said coldly. "It was." Eleanor whispered nervously. "No." Charles snapped. "Now the police are demanding access to internal security archives." Eleanor's face drained of color. Because she already knew something the investigators didn't. The school's surveillance servers had been wiped clean earlier that morning. Hours later, inside the local police department, detectives stared at blank monitor screens in disbelief, while technicians attempted recovery. All hallway footage is gone. One investigator muttered, "Deleted remotely." Darius stood nearby with crossed arms while anger slowly darkened his expression. "Can it be restored?" he asked. The technician shook his head grimly. Whoever erased it knew exactly what they were doing. Naomi lowered her eyes in frustration. Without the surveillance recordings, much of the evidence tying West Valley administrators directly to the attacks could disappear in court. That was exactly what Charles Hale wanted. But before hopelessness could settle into the room, the police station doors quietly opened again. Lucas entered slowly. He looked exhausted, pale, terrified. Rainwater still dripped from his hoodie as he approached Darius carefully. "I knew they'd delete everything," Lucas said quietly. Darius narrowed his eyes slightly. "What are you talking about?" Lucas reached into his backpack with shaking hands and pulled out another flash drive. "I made backups." The room instantly went silent. Lucas swallowed hard before continuing. Every hallway clip, every deleted disciplinary report, every security recording Brandon's father tried to erase. His voice cracked slightly now. "I copied everything weeks ago." Even the detectives looked stunned. Darius stared at the drive in Lucas's hand for several long seconds before finally taking it. That small piece of plastic suddenly became the most dangerous object in West Valley. Because now the truth could survive. Lucas looked toward Naomi nervously. "I should have stopped this sooner." Naomi's anger softened slightly for the first time. "You're trying now," she said quietly, but outside the station windows, an unfamiliar black sedan remained parked across the street with headlights off. Watching. Waiting. Hours later. Long after midnight. Lucas finally left the police station alone despite officers warning him to stay somewhere safe. He insisted he needed to return home before his parents panicked. That was the last confirmed time anyone saw him, because sometime during the storm that night, Lucas Reed vanished. The abandoned warehouse sat near the industrial edge of West Valley, hidden behind rows of rusted shipping containers and broken security fences. Rainwater dripped steadily from the metal roof, while distant thunder rolled across the dark skyline. Police patrols searched the city for Lucas Reed. But Naomi Carter already knew where to look. Brandon Hale liked places where nobody could hear people scream. Darius parked the SUV silently outside the warehouse entrance just after midnight. The building looked dead from the outside, broken windows, faded warning signs, chains hanging loose from old loading docks. But faint light leaked through cracks beneath one of the side doors. Naomi's chest tightened instantly. "He's here." Darius stepped out first, scanning the shadows carefully. Even in silence, he moved like a fighter, entering dangerous territory. Controlled breathing, calm eyes, every instinct awake. Inside the warehouse, Lucas sat tied to a metal chair beneath a hanging industrial lamp. Blood stained the corner of his mouth where Brandon had punched him earlier. His hands trembled violently against the restraints while Brandon paced nearby like a caged animal slowly losing his mind. "You ruined everything," Brandon muttered. Lucas looked up weakly. "You ruined it yourself." Brandon suddenly kicked the chair hard enough to send it crashing sideways onto the concrete floor. "Shut up." The scream echoed through the warehouse. Brandon no longer looked like the untouchable king of West Valley. His hair hung messily over his face. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from sleepless nights, spent watching his reputation collapse across national television. Every news station in America now called him a monster. Sponsors abandoned his family. Protesters gathered outside his house daily. And worst of all, people finally stopped fearing him. That terrified Brandon more than prison ever could. Lucas struggled painfully against the ropes. "The police already have the files." Brandon grabbed him by the hoodie violently. "Then I'll make sure you disappear before you testify." At that exact moment, boom! The warehouse side door slammed open. Brandon spun around instantly. Naomi stood in the entrance beside Darius. Rain dripping from their clothes while cold air swept through the building behind them. For a brief second, nobody moved. Then Brandon laughed weakly. "Of course," he whispered. "You just couldn't stop ruining my life." Naomi stepped forward slowly, fury burning through her exhaustion now. "You did this to yourself." "No," Brandon screamed suddenly. The outburst echoed violently through the warehouse. Brandon pointed toward Naomi with shaking hands. "Everything was fine before you came here." Lucas stared at him in disbelief. Darius remained completely still. That silence only made Brandon more unstable. "You think you're some victim," Brandon shouted toward Naomi. "You walked into my school acting better than everybody." Naomi's voice stayed cold. "Your school." "Yes," Brandon snapped. "Everybody listened to me before you." Something inside him had fully broken now. Years of privilege. Years of protection. Years of believing consequences only happened to other people. And now the entire country hated him. Brandon stumbled backward, breathing heavily while rage and panic mixed together uncontrollably. "You know what the funny part is?" He laughed bitterly. "Nobody cared before this." He pointed wildly toward Lucas. "Teachers knew. Toward Naomi, the principal knew. Then toward Darius. My father paid everybody to stay quiet." The warehouse suddenly became silent again. Because Brandon didn't realize something crucial. Naomi's phone was recording. Live streaming. Thousands of viewers had already joined within minutes after Naomi activated the stream outside the warehouse. Fearing something dangerous might happen, comments flooded upward rapidly as Brandon unknowingly confessed in real time. He's admitting everything. Somebody send this to the police. Oh my God. Brandon kept ranting without noticing. That loser, Ryan, blamed me for his own weakness, Brandon shouted. People get bullied every day. Naomi's expression hardened instantly. Lucas looked horrified. Even Darius's eyes darkened dangerously at the mention of Ryan Mitchell. You drove him to suicide, Naomi said quietly. Brandon laughed again. A broken laugh this time. Maybe he should have fought back harder. The live stream exploded. Viewer counts skyrocketed across social media as clips spread in real time. Meanwhile, miles away on a private airfield outside the city, Charles Hale hurried toward a waiting private jet while speaking furiously into his phone. What do you mean? He confessed publicly. He shouted. His lawyers talked over each other desperately through the speaker. Federal investigators are involved now. You need to leave immediately. Police are preparing warrants. Charles looked back nervously toward the airport entrance. Luxury luggage had already been loaded onto the aircraft. He had planned everything carefully offshore accounts. Emergency transfers. Escape routes. If Brandon stayed silent long enough, Charles believed they could survive the scandal. But Brandon had lost control completely, and now the entire country was watching the Hale empire collapse live, back inside the warehouse. Brandon finally noticed Naomi's phone screen glowing beside her hand. His face changed instantly. No, realization hit him all at once. The live stream. The viewers. The confession. You stupid bitch. Brandon lunged toward Naomi violently. But Darius moved first. Fast enough to look unreal, he intercepted Brandon mid-charge and slammed him backward onto the concrete floor with terrifying force. The impact knocked the breath from Brandon's lungs instantly, while Naomi rushed toward Lucas to untie him. Then came the sound of tires outside. Multiple vehicles. Door slamming. Voices shouting. Blue and red lights suddenly flashed through the warehouse windows as police stormed the building from every entrance simultaneously. Don't move. Officers flooded inside with weapons drawn, while Brandon lay trapped beneath Darius's grip. Breathing wildly in panic, the warehouse exploded into chaos. Lucas collapsed weakly into Naomi's arms. Police surrounded Brandon from every direction. And somewhere outside in the storm, the sound of helicopters thundered across the city sky as the final collapse of West Valley finally began. The collapse of West Valley High happened faster than anyone imagined. By morning, every major news network in America carried the same headline across their screens. West Valley bullying scandal exposed. Footage from Brandon Hale's warehouse confession spread nationwide within hours. Millions watched him admit to years of harassment, cover-ups, and cruelty. While live-stream comments exploded across every platform online, news stations replayed clips of him screaming. Everybody knew beside footage of Naomi Carter standing silently under flashing police lights. This time, nobody could bury the truth. Brandon Hale was arrested before sunrise. Television helicopters followed police vehicles as officers escorted him out of the warehouse in handcuffs. Gone was the confident golden boy of West Valley. Gone was the untouchable athlete who ruled hallways with fear and humiliation. Brandon looked broken now, hair disheveled. Face pale. Eyes empty beneath the floodlights of cameras recording his downfall forever. Students across the country watched in disbelief. Some celebrated openly online. Others stayed silent, realizing how many times they had laughed at someone else's pain just to fit in. At the same time, federal investigators stormed West Valley High carrying boxes of evidence from the police department. Entire administrative offices were sealed off behind yellow tape, while teachers gathered outside classrooms whispering nervously. Parents demanded answers. Reporters crowded every entrance. Protesters held photographs of former students whose stories had been ignored for years. Principal Eleanor Graves resigned before noon. Her official statement claimed she had failed to recognize the severity of the situation. Nobody believed her, especially after leaked emails proved she had deleted bullying reports to protect the Hale family's reputation. Federal investigators now examined financial records, erased surveillance archives, and secret agreements tied to Charles Hale's donations to the school district. And Charles himself never made it onto the private jet. Police arrested him at the airfield, less than 20 minutes before departure after federal warrants were issued for obstruction of justice. Witness intimidation and conspiracy related to multiple hidden incidents at West Valley High. The Hale empire collapsed in a single day, but for Naomi Carter, the attention felt heavier than victory. By the end of the week, her face appeared everywhere. Interviews, headlines, viral videos. Strangers online called her brave. Survivors of bullying from across the country flooded her messages with their own stories. Students posted videos admitting they stayed silent, while classmates suffered because they were afraid of becoming targets themselves. Naomi never expected any of it. She had only wanted the harassment to stop. One afternoon, she stood alone inside the old boxing gym, watching Darius wrap tape around his scarred hands before training. Sunlight filtered weakly through dusty windows while the familiar smell of leather and sweat filled the quiet room. For the first time in days, there were no reporters, no cameras, no crowds, just father and daughter. Darius sat down heavily on the bench across from her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he looked at her carefully. "I'm sorry." Naomi frowned slightly. For what? Darius lowered his eyes briefly. "Something he almost never did. I should have come sooner." The words hit harder than she expected. For years, Naomi saw her father as unbreakable. A legend. A man feared by fighters around the world. But sitting in front of her now was simply a father carrying guilt he couldn't punch away. Darius exhaled slowly. "You were suffering while I kept thinking you wanted space." His jaw tightened. A father's supposed to protect his kid. Emotion finally cracked through Naomi's composure. "You did protect me." "No," Darius replied quietly. "I arrived after they already hurt you." Silence settled between them again. Then Naomi stepped forward and hugged him tightly for the first time since arriving at West Valley. Darius closed his eyes briefly. Outside the gym, the world still argued online about scandals, lawsuits, and criminal charges. But inside that moment, none of it mattered. Because for Naomi, the loneliness was finally over. A week later, West Valley High reopened under heavy media attention and increased security. Federal investigators still moved through parts of the campus while students whispered nervously whenever cameras appeared nearby. The school no longer felt powerful. It felt haunted. Naomi walked through the front entrance alone that morning, wearing headphones around her neck and a dark hoodie over her shoulders. Conversations instantly lowered the moment students noticed her. Then something remarkable happened. The crowded hallway slowly parted. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered insults. Nobody raised phones to record her anymore. Students stepped aside silently as Naomi walked forward beneath the championship banners hanging overhead. Some looked ashamed, others afraid. A few lowered their eyes, entirely because they remembered exactly where they stood while she was being humiliated. Lucas Reed stood near the lockers, watching quietly. Bruises still lingered faintly across his face after the warehouse incident. But he gave Naomi a small nod as she passed. This time, people noticed him too, because silence no longer protected anyone. Naomi continued walking through the hallway that once felt like enemy territory. Every step echoed softly against polished floors, while hundreds of students moved out of her path without being asked. The same school that once treated her like prey now watched her with uneasy respect. At the far end of the corridor, sunlight poured through tall windows overlooking the football field, where Brandon Hale once ruled everything. Now the field sat empty. And for the first time since Naomi arrived at West Valley, the building was completely quiet. No laughter, no live streams, only silence. The kind of silence people make when they are finally forced to face what they became. Because in the end, the most terrifying thing was never the bully. It was the people who stood there watching. West Valley thought money could silence victims forever. Brandon thought power meant nobody would ever fight back. But in the end, one girl they mocked for being different became the reason their entire empire collapsed in front of the whole country. Naomi survived the humiliation, the betrayal, and the silence of everyone who stood there watching, and that's what made her stronger than every bully who tried to break her. But now I want to ask you something. If you were standing in that hallway while Naomi was being attacked, would you have spoken up or stayed silent like everybody else? Let me know your answer in the comments below. And if this story shocked you, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about justice, revenge, and the moments bullies realize they picked the wrong person.